Okay, I think we are live.
Are we live?
All right, welcome. This is Christopher and Gena Maselli with Writing Momentum. We have been writers for a little over 25 years, and between us, we've got well over 40 years of experience, and we just love sharing that with other writers, and that's why we are starting this podcast. That's what we're going to be doing here. And so one of the ways we just wanted to start the podcast is to go through a couple stories, but I think maybe on this first one, maybe we should take a minute and just each talk a little bit about who we are so people know.
Okay.
So do you want to start, Gena?
Sure. Well, I'm Gena Maselli, and I've been writing for a little over 15 years, and I'm a freelance writer, but I'm also a ghost writer, which I do freelance. I'm an editor. So I wear a lot of different hats. I've done a lot of different types of writing. I've done script writing. I've done book writing. I've done devotion writing. So, and I have a little bit of experience doing short stories. But I haven't conquered the novel yet. I'm waiting to do that. I'm hoping to do that in the next year or so. So yeah, there's a lot of different writing that I do, and it's been a journey for me. And so if I can help other people shortcut their path,
fast track
themselves, then I'm really happy to do that.
And I think that's the thing is, the longer you write, the more types of writing you tend to do, because you've got to make an income, first of all. Mm-hmm. Second of all, you want to gain a lot of different kinds of experience. So I'm kind of in the same vein. I started writing about 25 years ago. I started writing in advertising, and then I had a long stint where I spent time writing children's books and children's activity material, comics, that sort of thing. I still do a lot of that now. Then I got back into more marketing and into digital marketing, and we've done ghost writing and direct mail marketing and just all sorts of things. It seems like all across the board. Mm-hmm. I love writing, and but more than that, I think I love helping others just find their passion for writing and kind of fast track their way into writing, and that's why we created Writing Momentum. It's all about fast tracking your success in writing.
I think we've both had people who have poured into us, editors that we've been able to work with,
for
other
sure.
writers that we've worked with, people that have blazed the trail for us. And I still love to see what those people are doing. I love to get their feedback. So I think people have just poured into our writing and into our careers over the years, and so I hope we can do that for others. And
that's what we encourage you to do: is as you become a better writer, pour into other people's lives too. So very good. All right, let's get to the stories.
And I've been looking at different stories that I thought would be interesting for writers to hear about, and not just look at them for what the story is, but how they really apply to our writing life or to a writer's life. The first one I came up with was I Cured My Social Media Addiction by Reading Books. It's by Simon Doherty. And Chrissy, I know you've read it, and we're going to help us summarize it. So
this is an article that was on Medium, which is one of our favorite sites for reading about writing, because so many writers use Medium to talk about writing and talk about the writing life and that sort of thing. So this is one of those stories. Simon talks about how he took a kind of a break from social media, and what he did was kind of clever. Every time he had an impulse to get on social media, he decided he would read a book instead, sit down and read instead. And so that's why he says he cured his media addiction by writing books. So this is kind of interesting, because he says he started off and he found himself so distracted. For instance, even as he was starting to write this story, he had 27 browser tabs open and only 4 related to his work. Can you relate? Yeah. I can relate. I've had that happen, right? So what he decided to do was quit social media for 1 month, and whenever he felt the urge to log in, he'd read a book instead. So on the second day, he said that he still had this muscle memory urging him to go to Facebook.com. By day 6, he was receiving emails from Facebook, essentially saying, "Where are you? Come back in. You've got notifications." By day 8, he had received 5 emails in that day alone, it sounds like, with 135 notifications on Facebook. They certainly want to keep
Wow.
us coming back, don't they? And then he said what's interesting, though, is that he found over the 30 days is that his brain still found new ways to distract itself. So it wasn't just the social media that was the issue. It was the fact that he, kept kind of trying to find ways to do other things. But that said, nothing is quite as a sink as social media is. So what really stood out to you in this story, Gena?
Well, I loved what he calls digital procrastination. He talked about that. And I think that's something that, man, it can just suck you in. Even this morning, I think I woke up and I started going through my inbox. And I don't have the best system because sometimes I use my inbox as my to-do list as well. And so I'll leave things in there because I figure if I file them, I'll never remember to go back and get them, or I'll lose where they are. So I keep lots of emails in there. But I was going through my inbox. I was looking at, I can't remember if I looked at social media. I think I did end up sending one social media message to a friend, or actually to a family member. So I think the thing that struck me about this is I think it brings up the question of what is social media for the writer. As a writer, we don't have the luxury, I don't think, in this day and age, to say I'm just completely dropping off the map. I'm going dark on social media completely. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think
so. Social media is one of our voices as having our online platform as authors, and so we can't ignore social media. Now, you may hear that and think, well, I know some authors who don't use social media. I would counter that and say I think they could probably even build their platform more if they did use social media. I think social media, it's an avenue of communication.
I think that's what you're talking about, is that it really is a tool. And I think we have to look at that. I think there's ways that we can use social media where it is that time suck that just takes us, distracts us, and allows us to procrastinate on projects and that kind of thing. But as a writer, it is a tool, and it is not just I wouldn't say it's just a useful tool. I would say it's a necessary tool, whether it's getting the message about your products and your books out, or whether it's connecting with other writers, getting feedback. I know we're both on some different groups where we get to learn about whether it's writing or whether it's marketing, those types of things. So
it's a way for people to get to know you and give them a window into your life. But like when I use social media, I used to use it very haphazardly and just, connect with anyone, anytime, and fill up my feed. And I'd go there every day and I'd scroll through the feeds and trying to see what everyone had to say and that sort of thing. But as I started to use social media as a platform for writing, it changed my use of how I use it. I don't now do a lot of frivolous updates on social media. It's just that's not the thing I want to do there. It's a place I want to connect. So every day I'll log into the different social media channels. I actually have set it up on my browser so that in the morning I can open up every social media channel, see if there's been any comments on anything that I've posted, and I want to respond to those comments because it's a way to connect with my audience. But outside of that, I don't waste a lot of time going through feeds. I don't use it as a way to get to know other people. I use it as a way for other people to get to know me as an author, because I'm not using social media on a personal basis. I'm using it on a business basis,
So
if that makes sense.
You have a personal account, though, right?
I have personal accounts
So we
on
have our
almost
business fan account.
Yeah.
But
I have personal accounts on almost every platform, but I've also got business accounts. And I don't really use the personal accounts. I use the business accounts. And the business accounts are there, like I said, for interaction. That's what I post to. That's where I answer questions, interact, get to know people. But I don't really use it as I've stopped using it as a time waster because it becomes such a time waster. Just like Simon said here, it's the kind of thing that just, got a hold of him. And he had this point in the article where he said, strip back to essentials Facebook is really a direct contact marketing agency. Facebook's executives line their pockets with advertising dollars that are generated by our attention. But our attention is one of our most precious resources. And that is absolutely true. You have to decide as an author, what do you want to give your attention to? And that doesn't mean you should just give up social media because you don't want to give it your attention. But what it can mean is you just don't want to let it steal your attention. Instead, have intention when you use social media. Make everything that you do on social media be intentional. And when you do, I think you'll find it a very, very useful tool. Mm-hmm. Incidentally, Simon said by the end of the month, he had read 5 books and 3 magazines during the time that he'd given up social media. So well done, Simon. Very well done. A great article.
So let me ask you this, Chris. Do you, when you've got a personal account, when you get friend requests, like on Facebook, do you accept those friend requests? And how do you, because you use it as a tool for writing, how do you handle that? Because you've got people who would friend you, maybe who've read something that you've written, or maybe they've seen some of our posts through Writing Momentum on our different social media sites. So how do you handle that?
So on Facebook in particular, I reserve my personal Facebook accounts for people that I know really well. It's pretty much just close friends and and all family. Hopefully all your family's close, right? So friends and family, but especially close friends. I don't even connect with a whole lot with, people that I knew in high school that I don't, I'm not really in their lives anymore. They're not in mine. To me, it's more just close friends and family. Anyone else, you'll notice if you go to my personal Facebook page, I push people right to our business Facebook page, where our fan page, as they might call it, at which is facebook.com/writing momentum. And that's where we post all kinds of things about writing, and we have conversations there. We have a group there where you can talk about writing. Really, most people who get to know us through our books, that's what they want to talk about anyway. And so it's a great way to build relationships and keep the personal separate from the business, but still be personal in the process.
Okay. And Simon talked about notifications. I know you've made a big change with your notifications.
Yeah. Well, notifications are, he talked about how he had, 135 notifications. I use notifications to tell me when someone has left a comment or a post on one of our pages. But other than that, I turn everything off. And I certainly don't have any notifications on my phone. I don't need notifications on my phone for even my email, because otherwise it's such a distraction anywhere you go. To me, when I sit down to work, I use on my computer, I'll sit down and I'll open up my mail. I'll open up the different social websites, spend some time every day going through all that, then close it and get back to writing. But you certainly don't need all that on your phone buzzing and trying to get your attention.
I think I've definitely started narrowing down my notifications and turning different ones off, and I'm waiting to see which ones I can turn off that I won't miss, or that I won't actually that I really don't care about.
I think you might be surprised, because really the only thing that I've left notifications on for are my messages, like text messages, because usually those are urgent, or they're from people who are like family that you want to get a hold of you right away. Almost anything else can wait.
Yeah. I was on the phone this morning and I kept getting these buzzes, and I was wondering it was just notifications of just emails and social media stuff, and I thought that's got to go.
Makes you feel like everything is urgent.
Yeah, it does, or that you're missing out. So yeah,
very good story.
Very good. Thank you, Simon Doherty.
All right, Gena, why don't you tell us about this next story?
Okay, the next one is 5 powerful writing tips from C.S. Lewis, from Nicole Bianchi. And Nicole, we found this on Medium. We went ahead, though, and found her, went directly to her website to read this.
Which is NicoleBianchi.com.
Yeah, NicoleBianchi.com.
We'll have links to all these in the podcast notes, by the way.
We'll definitely. And so she talks about C.S. Lewis's 5 writing rules and how those apply to any writer. And C.S. Lewis is just such a favorite. It's a favorite with kids and with adults as well. So
and he loved to write to kids, and because kids would write to him, and he'd always write back to them, it says. And so there's one young girl named Joan who sent a letter to him in 1954 and asked him how to write well. And this letter's like 60 years old now, but these are the 5 tips.
Okay. First tip was always try to use the language so as to make quite clear what you mean and make sure your sentence couldn't mean anything else. And I think there's just bottom lining it, that's just making sure that your writing isn't confusing.
Yeah, you mean what you say and you say what you mean, right?
Right. And I think there's times, I mean, that's something that I think both of us, when we edit for one another, that we do is we look for any sentences that don't make sense, or, who are you talking about here? Are you talking about the reader? Are you talking about the example you just gave? Where are you going with it? So clarifying, and I think this is interesting because you can read something 50 times yourself, but then someone else reads it and they're lost. They're like, they'll say, I don't know what you're talking
about. That's right.
Here.
It makes sense in our head because we wrote it, but to other people, they're going, what?
Which is why I think, is just another example of why editing and having an editor is so important. The second point, or the second rule, is always prefer the plain, direct word to the long, vague one. So I thought...
yeah, in other words, be clear, right? Prefer the plain, direct word to the long, vague one. Just be clear as to what you're saying. Clear, concise. Yeah, that's good.
3 was never use abstract nouns when concrete ones will do. If you mean more people died, don't say mortality rose. Mortality rose.
That's right. So again, that's kind of a be concrete, when don't try to be all flowery in your language. Just be concrete and straightforward with what you write.
And then in writing, don't use adjectives which merely tell us how you want us to feel about the thing you're describing. I mean, instead of telling us a thing was terrible, describe it so that we'll be terrified. Don't say it was delightful. Make us say delightful when we've read the description. All those words, horrifying, wonderful, hideous, exquisite, are only like saying to your readers, please, will you do my job for me? I thought that was great.
And that's the principle of show, don't tell, right? You don't just want to tell. Don't just say, a terrible, Mike felt terrible. No, instead, show how he felt through his actions. Or through what's happening around him, that sort of thing.
Yeah. I think that's good because, when I have talked with writers before where I would say, you've told me something here, but you need to show me what you're talking about. And that can be kind of a vague thing to people if you're not familiar with what that is. So can you think of an example? I'm springing this on you, but can you think of an example like that you just said? You just gave one, but can you think of one that was just really great in a book that you wrote or read or?
Well, I don't know if anyone comes to mind. I mean, I just think usually of the emotional things. So usually when we write, it's very easy, especially in that first draft, to say, they
were so scared.
They were so scared. Instead of describing how the hairs stood up on their arms and how their eyes got really big, or how they shrunk back into the covers, as they're sitting on the couch watching a movie or something like that. And instead we just say they're scared. Well, you don't need to say that. You're like C.S. Lewis is saying, you're asking the reader to do the job for you and picture what's happening for you. Instead, you're better off you describe what happened and let them feel the emotion.
And then the 5th one is don't use words too big for the subject. Don't say infinitely when you mean very. Otherwise, you'll have no word left when you want to talk about something really infinite.
Yeah, bottom line, he's just saying don't exaggerate, right? It's easy when we tell stories to exaggerate. You always hear about people who tell tall tales, right? Because the fish got bigger and bigger every time they tell the story. It's easy to do, and it's easy to see something so grand in your mind that you just want to make it so big, but you get so big you work yourself into a corner because you can't get bigger. So he's saying don't exaggerate. Tell the story the way it is, and then you've always got an area to move up from there.
I would probably even say really rethink the word very. Describe it or go into greater detail about it, but really try to limit that that word. I try to, I don't, if I have written very in the first draft, I try to get rid of it and somehow convey that message some other way. So take out the very, take out the a lot, take out those kinds of inexact words.
Yeah, and I do think all these, you make a good point. I think a lot of these things are things to look for on that second draft. Like, don't get caught up on the first draft trying to make everything perfect. Instead, just get the first draft done. Then on the second draft, as you're going through, you can look and say, oh, is my language too flowery? Did I use a word here that's exaggerating? Did I use a very when I could have used something else in its place? So it's always, you want to do that on your editing drafts, right? Not on that first draft. The first draft, don't edit yourself, just write. Get the draft done, because that is the hardest thing for most people to do.
It is. Absolutely.
All right, next we have a Q&A. This is a question we received from James Bush. He's at The Real James Bush on Twitter. And his question that he sent in is this. He said, hello, Chris and Gena. You already know my name, but I'll introduce myself. My name is James Bush.
I think it's Bush.
Bush? James Bush. I've been writing seriously since the time I started 10th grade, and by the time I was 18, I had completed 8 feature-length screenplays. Wow, this guy is prolific.
Yes,
well
no
done,
kidding.
James. He said, but since then, I have discovered that novel writing is more of a broad spectrum, and I plan on rewriting some of those screenplays into novels, and I've taken that path and devoted a lot of time to reading and narrative writing. It's a true pleasure, period. I'm glad that you found the kind of writing you love. That is awesome. He says, I love it, and now I'm working on a novel that is probably about half done, but who can really tell? I've been working on it since August 2017. It's very hard with a full-time job, but you can do it, James. Stick with it.
Yes.
I'm getting there, and I hope it's complete in the next 6 months, but the creative process is so unpredictable. So here's his question. He says, I was wondering if you could tell me a little bit of advice where to go when the manuscript is complete. Advice, pointers, anything would be appreciated. You seem like two very nice people. I've met a lot of nice writers on Twitter since I've created a page, but none really reply to me. And when it comes to advice on publishing, I'd really love to have some. I'll end up by saying thank you, and anything is greatly appreciated. Well, James, I hope that you have found the writing community on Twitter to be very helpful. We have found that out of all the social media platforms, the writing community on Twitter, that's hashtag writing community on Twitter, has been super, super helpful and
active.
Such an active community. We love it. So, a piece of advice, what to do when your manuscript is complete is what the bottom line is here. So the first thing we got to say is absolutely whatever you do, make sure you have it edited, okay?
Definitely.
Make sure that piece is edited, that it is ready for anyone else to see. Because a lot of times we can think our writing is ready, but when someone else reads it, they trip up on it a little bit, and we want to make sure that it's ready for them to see.
It goes back to what we were talking about with the C.S. Lewis about just making sure that nothing's confusing.
That's right, he said that.
And make sure that you're, when you're talking about novel writing, you've got to make sure that everything comes together, that all your storylines come together, plot points are met. And so, yeah, there's a lot in that an objective eye will help you fine and sharpen.
For sure.
And I would really encourage you to have that edited by a professional editor. I think it's fine to have friends and family read it, but a lot of those people are already your fans, so they're going to tell you how great it is, where an editor is going to look at it with a much more objective eye.
Yeah, absolutely. So the second piece of recommended advice, I guess, that I'd give you is, and this is probably my favorite piece of advice, I give it out all the time, and that is start attending writers' conferences. There are conferences just for writers all around the world. And when you go to a writers' conference, you will find people who just have an idea and they've never written anything before. And you will find people there who are professional writers who've been writing for 50 years, right? And they've made a living doing it. And it's great because you can actually go and learn from other writers and what they're doing. But more than that, there's also editors, at the conferences, and there are agents at the conferences looking for writing. And so I would encourage you, after you have this piece edited, to go to a writer's conference that has some agents at it and have the experience of sitting down and pitching your idea to the agents. And you never know when one might get picked up.
Well, I think I would even take a step before that one. I definitely think the Writers Conference is the way to go. And you can do a Google search on that to find writers' conferences in your area, in your state, in your region. Chris and I will both be at WriterCon in Oklahoma City over Labor Day. So that is a great conference that we can recommend.
And I think it's writercon.org.
Right. Okay.
WRITERCON.org. And I'll put the link in the show descriptions.
Mm-hmm. But even before you get to the Writers Conference, you want to have your proposal ready. You want to, the proposal, we can't overstate this to say a proposal. You want a sharp, good proposal. You want to hit every point in that proposal. You want to use that proposal as it is a tool that you will use when you are sitting down with agents and editors. Chris has a teaching that he's done on this, on proposal writing, and his proposals are fantastic. So he's actually won awards with that. So I strongly encourage you, go through that teaching or go through another teaching. If you don't use Chris's teaching on that, find another teaching on writing a really good proposal. And that will give you some ideas of, it'll teach you not only how to market your book, but it'll teach you how to think about your book in a marketing way. So you will be doing comparative analysis of what are the other books that are like this that are out there. And if you're saying, well, there's no book that's like this, mine's completely original, what I mean is you're going to find books in your genre that are for your audience, for your market. So you want to go through that process. And it's not a simple process. This is not something that you're going to sit down and do in, an evening in front of the television. This is a process that's going to take you a while to go through that of how do I describe my book in 3 paragraphs? How do I describe it in 1 paragraph? How do I summarize it in a sentence? What was my inspiration for writing it? Why am I qualified to write this? And so the qualification one, that probably doesn't apply to novels as much, but still you want to go through that marketing process of looking at this and really thinking about not just, oh, I've got this great book, but why would an editor or a publisher want to publish it? It's a great book, but why? What makes it unique? Do you have a unique voice? Are you reaching a unique audience? Are they looking for books in that genre? They're actively seeking those books. So you want to go through that process. And plus, writers' conferences are just great places to learn. I don't think I ever go to a writers' conference and don't walk away thinking about something in a new way.
Absolutely. And to speak to the cost of writers' conferences, they're usually anywhere from about $50 to several hundred, $500 or $600. Plus, you've got lodging and that sort of thing if they're a multi-day conference. But I don't think I've ever been to a writers' conference that has not essentially paid for itself through the knowledge I've received or through the networking that I've had, just the contacts you make, the people you meet, the ideas that are come on fire inside of you as a result. So absolutely, if you can hit a writers' conference, get to a writers' conference, you'll find it to be one of the best things you can do.
And I think it's really, I think writers' conferences are, you discover that you've got a tribe when you get there. You discover that you're surrounded by all these great writers, these people who are as passionate about this as you are, which is not something you necessarily find in your everyday life. You've got people around you who want to encourage you and they love you, but there's something special about going to a writers' conference and being around other writers and there's just this great energy, and you meet great people too.
Absolutely.
So yeah. So thanks, James Bush, for writing in. I hope that we helped you and answered your question. We do also have a download on our website, how to get What is the title?
How to get noticed by agents, editors, and readers. And you can go to writing.fyi/get noticed or writingmomentum.com/get noticed. And you can download that. It's absolutely free. It's just something we created for the writing community that has a list of ways that you can get your book noticed. Definitely check that out.
Yes.
All right. We just want to thank everyone who's joined us live online for stopping in with us on our first live podcast recording. We're hoping to get these several of these lined up, and then we're going to put these on iTunes and all that good stuff. If you have a question for us here at Writing Momentum, please send us a tweet at Writing Momentum, or you can find us on Facebook or YouTube or just about anywhere at Writing Momentum. So send us a question. We'd love to answer it on our podcast or just online with you. We so appreciate you being a part of our community, and we're just putting each other on the fast track to success.
That's right.